With the year 2024 coming to a close, I'm here with my top 10 movies of the year. Overall, this year was decent for movies. I don't think it was great. I think it started off really slow and there was not much that I was gravitating towards. But then it started to heat up. The year got to be a bit better and I ended up actually with a good amount of movies that I really enjoyed. I think it was a great year for horror, a lot better than last year. I feel like too, I actually have a bit more of a diverse list than I did last year. Although I will say it's still dominated by horror. I'm the horror guy. Those are my sensibilities, so that's what I'm going to gravitate more towards. With that out of the way, let's get into some honorable mentions. So despite the negative reception, I actually really did dig the extended cut of Rebel Moon Chapter 1. I never watched the PG-13 cuts. I probably will never watch them. I just knew going in what we were getting, that we were going to get the full movie, the R-rated cuts, so I just didn't really see a point in wasting my time. It was obviously going to be the more neutered version with that PG-13 one, and I was obviously going to dig more of the Zack Snyder of the full uncut thing, and I did enjoy it. I liked it quite a bit. He's probably my favorite director, so I'm always looking forward to what he does, and yeah, overall just really dug it. Smile 2, I think that it was a great sequel, probably better than the first movie. It just amps up with a really great place to take this curse next with this new character. I think that she was in her right, very compelling, and although the movie can be a bit predictable sometimes and you're kind of left questioning the whole time what's real, what's not, that adds a layer of frustration sometimes. I think it was still a very effective horror movie, a great sequel, and I really enjoyed it. Next up, In a Violent Nature, for my final honorable mention. This movie's slow, but I think it's just really interesting. I like movies like this that are experimental horror. Sometimes that works for me. I'm one of the few who actually probably put Skinamarink on their top 10 last year. So a movie like In a Violent Nature that's trying something interesting, has some great kills, and I don't think is entirely boring. Worked well enough for me, and I really dug it. But now getting into the actual top 10 of the year list. For number 10, this was actually my number 1 for a good amount of the year because I felt like there was nothing that was sticking out, I guess is the best way to put it, but it's Civil War. What I really like about this movie is that it's so effective at putting war under a magnifying glass, really basing it down, and rather than putting a lot of political context and things that show any kind of solid stances, it seemed more interested in actually talking about war itself, the nature of tribalism, all that. It really is not that much of a political movie, and I kind of respect that they went that avenue because if you get the wrong director, you get someone who's either out of touch or really biased, you could get either a condescending or very alarmist movie. But rather than doing something like Don't Look Up, this movie decided to go a lot more subtle and kind of really examine human nature. It's pretty short, it can be a little bit surface level at times, but I think for what it's trying to do, it's very effective, and I appreciate it for that. So it's number 10. For number 9, probably the biggest surprise of the year, Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2. I have a lot of fun with this movie. It's just very unapologetically something that is right up my alley. This time around especially, they maximize the concept of having a Winnie the Pooh killer. They actually have lore. They cater it more towards being a Winnie the Pooh movie with the horror twist, rather than the first one where it's a little bit looser. They're going a little bit more in that first one for just a proof of concept. They had a more limited budget, so sometimes it does feel more like people in masks rather than Winnie the Pooh and Piglet. This one goes all in. It ups the prosthetics, the effects, the character. Christopher Robin's the best part of this movie. He's an effective character in his own right, and you see how he's dealing with all this, kind of being outcasted by the rest of the town and actually having that human layer and character to him. Meanwhile, the funness of having Winnie the Pooh run around killing people, it just adds up, stacks up to be a movie that I'm going to be really enjoying. It's going to be right up my alley. So yeah, Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2 at number 9. Now for number 8, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I'm a huge fan of the Planet of the Apes franchise. I've seen every single one of them, all the old ones. The Mark Wahlberg one, of course, the trilogy that's kind of propelled this to be something from the past that's become popular once again, especially with Matt Reeves' Planet of the Apes movies. And although I don't think this one really gets that close to how good those ones are, I think that those first 3, Rise, Dawn, and War, are top tier science fiction dramas. This still is a very, very solid continuation of this franchise. Very much kind of carves a path of its own where you could see where this franchise is going next. And it really doesn't need to be better than those to still stand on its own as a great Planet of the Apes movie. I like how they're giving you more context. This is hundreds of years later. You have very real issues that you could see human nature kind of crawling its way into the Planet of the Apes, their civilization, with religious fanaticism taking Caesar's teachings and interpreting it in different ways where some pervert it to use it to to maintain power. Some authentically and very nobly use it for the good of ape and humankind. When things like that happen, I appreciate the hell out of that. I really like that these Planet of the Apes movies kind of show the complexity of human nature, how these social dynamics reflect not just in humankind but the animal kingdom too. And I love when these movies hold up a mirror to our own society through the apes and show that when the noblest intentions become a starting point, they could still go horribly wrong. This movie has all that stuff, all that rich commentary, but I think it just doesn't have nearly as compelling of a character as Caesar. Noah's good, he's just no Caesar. Now for number 7, Juror number 2. This movie is one that I actually just saw for the first time a few days ago and was really impressed by. I like Clint Eastwood. I think that he's a good director. I feel like he's lost a bit of steam in kind of his later years as a director. I'd say American Sniper is probably the last of his movies that I've seen that, have really impressed me. But this has a very interesting concept, interesting moral dilemma, and it has such a great hook as a premise, and using the characters and kind of leveraging them to make you think, what would you do in this situation? What is the best thing to do? And then also it just keeps raising the stakes by having unintended consequences based on the main character's decisions. It makes you think about law. It makes you think about what justice really is. Everything that I think that this movie was trying to do and trying to tell, they told really well, in my opinion. Nicholas Holt's become one of those really great actors that has emerged. He's been good for a long time. I'm not trying to say it like he only just got good or he only really just appeared. He's been in things for a long time, ever since he was a kid in About a Boy. But he keeps leveling up. He's trying different roles, more challenging roles, and he has an insane amount of versatility. This is a very different character from even the characters that he's played this year. I mean, he's gone from this, and then he's doing Nosferatu, and then he does Superman. This guy could do it all. But a very captivating story, very captivating script. And what can I say? I wish I watched more movies like this, but very much enjoyed it. Well-deserved spot on the list. Now for number 6, another movie that has a lot of the plot center around Nicholas Hoult, Nosferatu. This has been one of my most anticipated movies of the year. I finally got to see it, and it just overall gives me exactly what I wanted in this. When you say Robert Eggers is directing a Nosferatu remake, this is pretty much exactly what I would have wanted out of that, what I would picture it would be, and it delivers on pretty much all those things. What you really want out of a Robert Eggers movie is this great style, this gothic nature to it, great performances, set design, all of his sensibilities telling this pretty familiar story all worked for me. And yeah, it is a familiar story. It's based off of Nosferatu, a copyright-safe Dracula movie from the 1920s. So you have some of those similar beats, but he does make it his own, as well as bring his sensibilities to the story, which, like I said, I really enjoy. So when you have this really high production, care brought to this story, and all these performances, all of this set design that's amazing, it's just very much for me. And because of that, easily locks in a place at number 6 on my list. Nosferatu's awesome. If you haven't seen it yet, go see it. It's really sick. Now getting into the bottom 5, the top 5 of the list, at number 5 is The Substance. This feels like the biggest horror success story of the year, probably. It's definitely in contention for the biggest runaway original success, and this is a movie that very much impressed me. I really liked it. Something that I love about horror movies like The Substance is that it brings very relatable issues, insecurities, and it expresses them in a very exaggerated way that ends with horrific consequences. It's very much trying to go into commenting on beauty standards, aging, subjects that everybody can kind of relate to in some way or another, but it takes it with this very fantastical premise and ultimately just uses it, runs away with it, and pretty much finds every interesting angle at which to tell this story and explore these ideas. And the best part about it is you could take this movie at face value even without the commentary, and it's a very intriguing and interesting movie, but the commentary, everything it's trying to say, it's like the icing on the cake, and it very much just adds to it. It's great without it, the story works without it, but it's also very much enhanced by the commentary, and it never feels heavy-handed or written in any kind of stupid or condescending way, which I think is definitely what made it one of the big success stories in horror of 2024, if not the biggest. But now getting into number 4, I'm talking about Deadpool and Wolverine, and this movie is just pure joy. As someone who's very much a big comic book fan, and we didn't have a lot of great comic book movies this year. In fact, most of them were pretty bad. Deadpool and Wolverine was just so exciting to see. You get two of the great characters, the great performances in comic book movies, and you get a movie where it's all for the fans. You get plenty of interactions between them, plenty of fight scenes, and also they show and spotlight what makes both of their characters so great, and they contrast really well because they're so different. Deadpool can bring something to the story that Wolverine can't, and Wolverine can bring something to the story that Deadpool can't. It's a very fun movie, and it's pretty light for the most part. That's completely fine with me because the whole time it's very watchable, it's very entertaining. The story isn't the strongest, but it really didn't need to be because all it really needed to sell me on was giving us finally this dynamic of Wolverine and Deadpool. And they bounce off each other really well, especially Ryan Reynolds playing Deadpool, Hugh Jackman playing Wolverine once again. The big thing about this movie that I was worried about was whether it would justify bringing Hugh Jackman back. He had such a great ending as Wolverine and Logan that it just seemed really risky and dangerous. But I almost kind of view this as more of an epilogue than an actual ending. Logan was very much his end. It was definitely, that's that character's ending. It's the perfect ending. But this just feels like its own thing, and it feels like it justifies it by being a celebration of all the previous movies, giving the fans something that they've wanted for years, and just because of timing felt like we would never get, with pretty much Deadpool blowing up in 2016, Wolverine ending in 2017. But as a fan of both these characters, it gave me exactly what I wanted. And I know a lot of people say that it's slop or whatever, it's the jingling keys. I don't really care. It gave me what I wanted. I'm a comic book fan. I enjoy stuff like this. I very much enjoyed this movie. So Deadpool and Wolverine definitely sliding in at number 4. Now for number 3, Quiet Place Day 1. This is actually a movie that I saw in December of last year at a test screening, but the finished product, when I saw it, I was very happy with it, even though it was a bit different. I wish that they kept a few things in that they didn't end up keeping in. I think what works so well about this movie is that it puts the human drama first. It's very much more focused on these characters, them coping with the end of the world, rather than being a dumb horror action movie with sci-fi. Not to say that they don't have the chases, they have new ways of making you cringe because of the way that they use sound and sound design. And of course, that's what you come to a Quiet Place movie for. That's the great stuff, the hook. But this movie puts character first, puts emotions first, and it was a smart idea to make this movie so character driven. That's very much what made me endear to these characters, endeared to the movie, and it left a big impact on me because that ending is just so emotional and powerful. Really enjoy it. I love that movie. Very happy that it came out in the way that it did. So yeah, for number 3, Quiet Place Day 1. Now for number 2, probably the biggest surprise to me that I'm putting it this high on this list, because when I first saw it, I was pretty mixed on it, and that's Longlegs. When I first saw it, there was just so much going on. It took twists that I didn't expect. I went in completely cold to this movie, just let the movie unravel, and I was just like, I don't know what the hell I just watched. I really don't know how I feel about it. But after rewatching it, just feeling drawn to it, it's one of those movies that you can't stop thinking about when you leave the theater. When you go away, you're still thinking about it. And that's kind of the experience that I had. I kept trying to find new meanings in what was going on in certain scenes, because it definitely watches extremely different when it is the second time. And I feel like I always find something new when I go back and watch this movie. Nicolas Cage gives a great performance, and I think that he's subdued at the right points, and then I think he goes full on batshit at the right points too. You're very much endeared to this protagonist of Lee Harker. You very much are on her side, and when things start to unravel and you figure out what's really going on, it's pretty shocking. It definitely turns the movie on its head, and that's something that will either alienate you or you'll be on board with. Even when I first watched it, I wasn't sure if I was on board with it, but I just can't stop thinking about this movie, can't stop wanting to rewatch it. I really dig it, and was even toying with putting it at number 1, but still well deserved. Definitely deserves the number 2 spot. Longlegs was pretty awesome. Now for number 1, my favorite movie of 2024, and you know what, it might be the most basic, it might be the most, yeah, obviously, if you know me, but it's Terrifier 3. The thing is, Terrifier 3 also came out at an interesting time because it came out like the same week as Joker 2, 2 rated R clown movies. With Joker 2, and there's a lot I like about Joker 2, don't get me wrong, but I think that Joker 2, where it decided to alienate and piss off its fans and take some interesting swings that really didn't work out in many cases, Terrifier 3 just gave the fans exactly what they wanted. What I really appreciate about Damien Leone as a director and his sensibilities as a director, I think he's very much someone who has his ear to the ground when it comes to the discourse surrounding these movies, listening to what people want, and just providing them that entertainment and those characters. He knows what works about this franchise at this point, and he absolutely delivers that. He finds new settings, contexts, ways to kill people with Art the Clown, but at the same time continue developing the stories of Sienna, Jonathan, introducing new characters, finding new ways to make Sienna feel desperate, but also giving her those wins in a way that doesn't make this movie feel just nihilistic and gross. The movies at this point have become very much about the light, good, evil, focusing on that contrast and having that balance. Whereas that first movie, it wasn't the same thing, it wasn't the same time. It was more nihilistic and it was just Art's killing people. There is no balance. There's nothing but evil. But in these sequels, they've given him a protagonist, an opposing force, and I very much invested in that story at this point. I love these characters. I love the story. And I love to see Art do some crazy shit. It's very rewatchable. It's one that I've seen 3 times at this point, which isn't very common for me anymore. But what can I say? I really love this franchise. Love talking about it. Love watching these movies. And I love seeing how it further develops and how much success these guys are having making these movies. So for the top spot, gonna put Terrifier 3. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section. What's your favorite movies of 2024? I'd love to hear. I'm GM Light. Have a good one.